recorded. Thank you. So officially welcome to KOWIN New York Chapter's fall conference titled Moving Forward from the Pandemic. And we are so excited to see all of you. And I would like to, without further ado, talk about today's schedule. So Sunny 선생님, if we can go to the next schedule slide. It is 3 o'clock, and we'll soon have our 회장님 do a greetings for us. And then we'll hear from Dr. Robin Moon on the topic of pandemics, learning from our past, investing in our future together. And then yours truly will share a little bit of special music, a Korean-American woman composer who lives in Long Island. And I will share music by her just as a little musical break, but also to celebrate the wonderful accomplishments from the arts among Korean women. And also after that, Dr. Mina will come and talk to us about rebuilding better together. There's a theme going on here, doing things together. We're going through this entire pandemic together, and we will get through together. And I think today's theme is that. And then we'll have a question and answer time. So throughout the entire hour of presentation, if you want to jot down your questions or put it in the chat, chat will be seen by everyone. We did that setting so that everyone can see your question so that we can maybe avoid redundancy. 똑같은 질문이 있으시면 누가 물어봤으면 you can skip it because we'll try to answer that. And then after that, we'll have a reflection on Google Form. It sounds a little funny, but there's a Google Form link that we will share. And before you leave the conference, if you could just fill that out and submit. And then we'll have some announcements from our fearless leader, President Ri, and then that will be at 5 o'clock. So without further ado, let me introduce our New York chapter of KOWIN. Right, President Chung-Hae Ri. And so let's stop sharing the screen for now. And so we can take a screenshot of the first screenshot. So everyone fix your hair, sit tall, 똑바로 앉으시고 눈 크게 뜨시고, 그쵸? 네.
Open your eyes. Okay, so this is the first page, and then I'm going to do the second page. Everyone, just open your eyes, smile. Thank you for cooperating. This, matter. Thank you. I'm done. Oh,
wonderful. Okay. So if you want to, you can put your setting to speaker view so that you can hear the speaker and see the person and be able to focus on that person. So here is our President Chung-Hae Ri giving us the opening remarks.
안녕하세요. 2021년 코윈 뉴욕 회장을 맡고 있는 이정혜입니다. 오늘 코윈 컨퍼런스에 줌으로 참석하신 모든 분들을 환영합니다. 코윈의 이름은 영어로는 Korean Women's International Network, 세계 한민족 여성 네트워크이며 2001년도 한국의 여성가족부에서 전 세계에 흩어져 있는 한민족 여성 지도자를 모아서 교류하려는 목적으로 결성되었습니다. 한국 정부는 2001년도부터 2018년까지 한국에서 국제회의를 열었고 2020년과 2021년에는 비대면으로 진행하였습니다. 코윈의 목적은 세계 한민족 여성들의 네트워크를 구축하고 한민족 여성의 인재를 발굴 및 육성하는 것입니다. 또한 한민족 여성의 정체성을 증진하며 여성의 발전과 지역사회의 발전에 기여함을 목적으로 하고 있습니다. 오늘의 시대 상황에 맞추어서 팬데믹 이후의 삶의 방향이라는 주제로 두 분의 훌륭한 연사를 모셨습니다. 오늘의 이 강연이 참석하신 모든 분들에게 도움이 되기를 진심으로 바랍니다. Hello, this is Chung-Hae Ri, President of KOWIN New York in 2021. Welcome everyone who attended today at KOWIN conference. Today's KOWIN conference. The full name of KOWIN is Korean Women's International Network. It was formed in 2001 by the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family in Korea in order to gather Korean women leaders from all over the world. The Korean government held international conferences in Korea every year from 2001 to 2018 and held a non-face-to-face meeting in 2020 and 2021. The purpose of KOWIN is to build a network of Korean women around the world and to discover and nurture Korean women talents. It also aims to promote the identity of Korean women and contribute to the development of a woman and the development of the current community. Today, we have two prominent speakers on the topic of moving forward from the pandemic. I sincerely hope that today's lecture will be helpful to all you attended. Thank you for checking in. 감사합니다.
네, 감사합니다. Thank you, President Lee. Next, we're going to go right into our first speaker, and Dr. J. Robin Moon. Let me introduce her to you. Dr. J. Robin Moon is a co-founder and chief strategy officer of Sana Solutions, a boutique health strategy consultancy practice. She's a social epidemiologist, a public health and executive management professional with 25 years of experience in private and public sectors, and an educator. She holds degrees from Harvard University, Columbia University, and the University of Chicago. She also holds faculty positions at CUNY Graduate School of Public Health and Health Policy, School of Medicine, and Institute Health Equity. Dr. Moon is also a certified yoga teacher, a black belt martial artist, and a perennial marathon runner. So help me please welcome by doing some reactions here like this to welcome Dr. J. Robin Moon.
Thank you so much. It's always very awkward to hear somebody else read my bio. 반갑습니다. 오늘 저를 이렇게 불러주셔서 너무 영광이고요. 오늘 I'm here to share with you, well, first let's start out with the good news. The pandemic will be over. It's going to end. And I am here to tell a story, this story of this world from the socio-epidemiological perspective of history of pandemics and how this is how human progress is made and how our future generation will be thriving after this is over. Okay, so what we can see on this slide, I just wanted to just give a personal story. 3월 초부터 하루하루 막 점점 막 분위기가 심각해지면서 저는 그때 주위에서 같이 일하는 동료들이랑, so I've been working in the Bronx up until recently. The consultancy and the professorship that I've had for a while sort of on the side, but I have been working in the Bronx at St. Barnabas Hospital as part of New York statewide Medicaid transformation work. So I have gotten to know the Bronx very well, very deeply, and we can still stand the first slide. Yeah. So all the colleagues at the time, the lockdown was impending, and we all said 2 weeks. It's going to be 2-3 weeks, and I said 14 to 16 weeks, and I thought I was being so conservative and progressive. But here we are, 2 years later. I remember feeling completely in despair. 매일매일 일어나서 울고 한 달쯤 제가 그랬던 것 같아요. 그리고 제가 같이 일하는 동료 중에서 3월 중순에 벌써, they got sick, and then 3 days later they went into ICU and they died. People that I used to see every day in my office. So that really put me into the spin of this existential despair. What's going to happen to this world? And it was not so much that I fear for my own life. I wasn't even there yet, but it was about my nephew and nieces, what's going to happen to our children? Is there going to be tomorrow? Like literally what is happening tomorrow? We didn't know. Remember, for those especially who live in New York City, 24 hours of sirens, hundreds of people dying every day for, weeks on end with no strong national leadership. So I know that you can all identify with that experience. So then after a month of crying every day, I got my act together and, then I got really busy. And I have gotten, not just because I'm a social epidemiologist, but, I've gotten into studying of the world's pandemic history. And that's what I want to share with you today. So next slide, please. So I just want to put the numbers into context. So, globally, as of yesterday, because I had to submit the PowerPoint to President Lee yesterday. So globally, we have almost 250 million cases, and United States 46.3 million cases. Death 5.03, so about 5 million. United States 751K. Just a couple of things for you to remember. 5 million death, that is 1/10 of 1918 flu pandemic. We had 50 million people dying. We can talk about this later, but that's, there are a number of reasons. The vaccine did not happen for years. Also, and therefore the pandemic lasted much longer. So 5 million, it's been really bad, but it could have been so much worse. The other very important point, if you look at these numbers, United States is disproportionately occupying the global number. So, something like 20%, a little less than 20% of all the world cases come from the United States. And we only have 4% of the entire world population. So 4% of the world population, we have 20 cases of the world, 20% of the cases of the world. And death, similarly, something like 15% of the global COVID death come from the United States. So very disproportionate. We're gonna get into that a little bit. Next slide. Something we need to remember, pandemic 우리가 지금, it just happens to be 우리가 살아있는 동안에 우리 일생에 이런 일이 지금 생겨서 어떻게 이런 일이 있나. 저도 마찬가지로 정말로 이게 완전히 말세지 말단이구나. 그렇게 생각을 하는데요. Plagues, pandemics have been with us throughout entire human history. Pandemics are not new to us, but we are new to the virus. So every time the pandemic happens, smallpox, for example, or even what is it? Leprosy, 나병, 한국말로 나병이라고 하죠. Those are all pandemics in the history. So, we have gone through this, but every time this happens, it's kind of like if the virus had a voice, they're thinking, oh God, this is a new species we need to invade. That's what pathogens do. So the virus does what we call ecological release. So they reproduce really, really fast and they make babies, right? So they want to spread because they are doing their survival thing. They're doing their virus thing. So this is something, the communicable diseases existed since, hunter-gatherer days of human lives, humanity. But when we settled into agrarian life 10,000 years ago, we had this communities, what we know as community, as opposed to like people kind of, wandering. So then the transmission of these pathogens started happening more. And then, it's almost a necessary evil. I don't know how better to put this, the more civilized humans became. So what does that mean? So we build cities, right? And then we forward trade routes. So there's a lot of back and forth moving, people, integrating people, interfacing the others, and then waging wars. We have wars. And also, I travel all the time, globally. So, and as we know, how, the virus, initially from China, went to Italy and the US, same thing, right? So this is the chances of pandemic happening has become higher. So globalization, so that also makes the speed of transmission much more rapid than a long time ago. And really important point, just a reminder, human behaviors and germs both spread through human social network. So the more engaged we are with our other humans, and I know you can identify with this, since through what has happened to us in the last 2 years, it is through human social network. So pandemics, evil, this should never happen. I think it's something that we need to understand what it is, for what it is, and be prepared. Next slide. I want to spend a minute or two to talk about the holes in the playing field. As we know, the pandemic did not happen on an even, level playing field. So what does that mean? So, I know that we've been talking a lot as a society about racism, sexism, classism. We know that housing and housing quality matters, childcare, food insecurity, all those things, and the racism, socially disadvantaged population also has a lot of mental health issues, starting with like deep stress and mind body connected, right? So the people who are more marginalized and more vulnerable to physical and mental health. So of course they would have pre-existing conditions, not all, but a lot of them. So these are all linked. So hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, asthma, all those are constructed through our socioeconomic differences. Racial, like an Asian race, white, black, it's a social construct. Because you're black, you don't have higher prevalence of hypertension, right? So holes in the playing field include racial ethnic minorities, and that includes us, Black, Latinx, Asian, and Native American, indigenous population, and people who are poor, lower income population, older people, people who live in rural areas who are less connected geographically, people experiencing homelessness, essential, as we know, frontline workers, people with disabilities, people who are in penitentiary, incarcerated criminal justice system, and non-US born person. That includes a lot of us and my parents and migrants. Next slide. So this is just like a one big article that came out last year. 뉴욕 타임즈에 브랑스에서 이제 바이러스 핫스팟 막 굉장히 막 센세이션한 사진이랑 기사가 나왔는데 거기서 포인트는 마스크도 없고 PPE 없고 that's all true. 그리고 테스팅 같은 것도 훨씬 더 브랑스 맨하탄에 비교하면은 많이 숫자가 적고 수요가 적고 그런 얘기를 했었는데 to really talk about like what's happening in the Bronx right now is really not taking the whole picture. There's always a historical context. So I want to talk about the Bronx population and Western Queens, where 저기 한국 분들, 교포 분들 많이 사시는 브랑스보다는 퀸즈 더 많이 사시는데 it's the same thing. Housing and housing quality and how that is so important in the in the pandemic that's happening right now, and how that has been a historically created phenomenon. Next slide. 여기 지도를 보시면 저기 색깔이 짙은 곳이 더 이제 like the higher frequency, right? So 근데 지도가 4개가 색깔은 좀 다른데 거의 비슷하죠. 어디가 색깔이 더 짙고 어디가 더 옅은지는. So number of positive COVID positive cases, number of service workers, 그러니까 뭐 레스토랑에서 일하시는 분들, 빌딩 청소하시는 분들, 딜리버리 하시는 분들, 뭐 그런 분들이요. 그로서리 일하시는 분들. And rent burden, meaning like people who don't have enough money to pay rent on time. 그다음에 people of color. So that's here in this case black, brown, but also I would add Asians, yellow. So racially, economically segregated neighborhoods. So these neighborhoods, the same dark color, 그게 다 concentrate 된 장소가 그러니까 같은 장소죠. 그게 왜 동네마다 이런 공통점이 있는지 그 다음 슬라이드 부탁합니다. 1930년 in the 1930s 그때 이제 mortgage 그 loan 같은 거 loan 같은 게 아니고 mortgage loan이 미국 정부에서 그거를 이제 주기 시작했을 때 there's this policy called redlining. So literally you see in this map the red areas, that's the area within which the people could not get loans to mortgage loans to buy a house because it has high concentration of Negroes, they said black, and also later like Italians, you know, like recent immigrants who were totally discriminated against. So the map on the right side, 저 이거가 브랑스 지금 맵인데요. 저기 밑에 그 색깔 없는 부분이 거기가 맨하탄 인워드 그 맨하탄 북쪽이고 빨간색 있는 데가 거기가 지금 제가 일하던 병원이 거기 있었는데 그 동네 거기가 redlining 된 지역이었습니다. 그래서 so when you don't get housing loans, you can move in there. So you know there's no because it's high concent, you know, that there's a high concentration, you know, of black population. So what happens? There's what we call disinvestment. Disinvestment is worse than no investment. Disinvestment means it's active withdrawing of funding investments to develop the area. So that would include, you know, not only housing, playgrounds, schools, kids' schools, healthy supermarkets, any other retail locations that would make, you know, potentially make money. Everything got withdrawn. So then what happens? And that is what happened to the Bronx and Western Queens as well, actually. I don't have it in the map here. So 1930년, 그 다음에 1960년, 70년, 80년대 Reagan era, 그때까지 계속된 현상인데요. 그 이후로 investment이 없고 there's a disinvestment. 그러면서 housing, there's a highest concentration of New York City NYCHA public housing is in the Bronx, and then followed by Western Queens. So next slide. So then what happened? So this is nothing to do with the COVID. If you look at on the left side, 이거는 이제 housing quality가 안 좋은 동네. 똑같죠? 색깔이 짙은 곳이, you know, it's like really literally the same area. Bronx, the same map that you just saw in the previous slide. 그 다음에 오른쪽에는 어린이 asthma, hospitalization, 그러니까 asthma 때문에 병원에 입원한 케이스. 그러니까, you know, I can give you a little trick and, you know, have you choose which map, represents which. It's sort of the same thing. So, 지금 그 슬라이드 하시는 분, can you go back 2 slides? To see the 4 maps, I just want to go back one more time. One more, yeah. So again, right? The same, no, yes. So you can see the housing quality, asthma, pre-existing conditions, right? And what, you know, that's what killed when, you know, once you got infected, a lot of people got infected with COVID, on the SARS-CoV-2 rather. So this is the same map. Oh, we can go forward. And the next one, please. Yes. So that is just to summarize, a point to take away. Just because pandemic happened doesn't mean everybody got hurt. Everybody got impacted in the same way or same level. Overcrowdedness is not the same as high density. 인구 밀도가 높은 거랑 overcrowded 거랑 완전히 다른 문제죠. 인구 밀도가 높은 걸로 치면은 맨하탄이 훨씬 더 브랑스의 2배거든요. 그런데 if you look at the numbers, down to the vaccination rate, everything, Bronx is double Manhattan. So that is a point for us to take away. And what happens, the second point in that there's no borders between the Bronx and the Manhattan. I live in Manhattan, Upper West Side, so I'm gonna make an example of, you know, Manhattan as an example of opposite of disadvantaged neighborhood. 브랑스에서 사시는 분들, 일하시는 분들 맨하탄 내려오고, 그러면서 제가 그런 사람들이랑 서브에서 마주치고, I can get COVID. So we're all connected together is my point. Okay, so and from this slide, I'm going to go really quick. There are the following 4 slides, I have laid out most of pandemics since 12th century BC. So that's in the Greek mythology, Homer's Odyssey, Iliad, Trojan War, sounds familiar? So it's from that time, Apollo. I'm just gonna run through really quickly. And then the next one, these are all the recorded, and most of them Western centric, as opposed to like, Chinese or Korean. And 한국에서도 옛날에 열병이랑 전염병이 굉장히 많은데, there's no written record of it. So this is only talking about what's written and history that we know. So 430 BC and Athens, through wars, that was typhoid fever, we all know. So kids get, vaccination and these things, right? AD 160, Antonine plague, that's in the Roman Empire. Again, like Roman Empire through like, Minor Asia, not necessarily all the way to Asia, like East Asia, because East Asia was not known at the time. I see somebody's comment, it's coming up, the Black Plague. So this was smallpox. And then, it goes on. And I want to point out that actually there's misspelling, recurring, should have 2 R's. Some plagues, more often than not, plagues and pandemics have lasted over a long time. And some recurred, it kept on coming back. It was like a continuing nightmare. So then, 541, 80, see this one lasted over 2 centuries. 11th century, now we're in the 중세기, Middle Age, leprosy, 나병. It's in the Bible also, right? So it was all of Europe. So 나병은, it's not virus. 이거는, it's a bacterial infection, and that, as we all know, what happens with 나병, right? So, and that now it has a name, Hansen's disease. All of these diseases that we have gone through in our human history have become very few. Actually, smallpox is the only one that got eradicated. They're still here with us. They have a lot of them became chronic disease that we can manage, but they're still here. Next slide. Even more, so this is where what we know, Albert Camus, the plague, the book. So 14th century, the Black Death, bubonic plague. This comes back like with vengeance, right? So, and at this point, the Black Death, 1/3 of the world population died. It should actually say from Asia. So through caravan and the trade routes, it came from Asia. That's what we think. So it would last, hundreds of years, and there's no, and this is, you get it from getting bitten by a flea. So it's a flea bite, so which was everywhere. So that also, you can imagine already, like the sanitation, right? Cleanliness of neighborhood or your house. And you can immediately imagine how poor people, with the poor housing, got the most of it also. Same story. And again, so bubonic plague keeps on coming back. 15th century, Christopher Columbus, when he came with his people into Caribbeans, measles, smallpox, and bubonic plague, he brought all of it. He didn't bring them, but with the expedition, right? So 90% of the indigenous people in the Caribbean died, 90%. And because, these diseases are totally new to the indigenous population. So, and then Mexico Aztecs in, 1520, and then 1548, Hispaniola is current day Haiti and Dominican Republic. 500 people out of 60,000 survived. Everybody else died. I mean, that's a stupendous number. And it keeps on repeating. Through the Americas, North America, right? Through Native American population and tribes and, the First Nations. So that happened. We don't really talk about it because these people don't matter. I'm being facetious and to say, the focus of, who gets hurt. Also, the way we portray, what happens in the human history gets inflated, conflated sometimes, depending on who matters. And then 1665, London, and like I said before, there are not necessarily pandemics, or well, pandemic means, it doesn't have to be the entire world, every single country, like the COVID, because we are globalized. But if it's in the entire continent, that's a pandemic. So, a bunch of pandemic or epidemics in Asia, Africa, have happened. We just don't know it. It's not known to the Western world. Next slide. So then cholera, as you know, that's from, it's a waterborne disease, right? From like dirty water, feces of animals, Jon Snow. So, and this one, there's a vaccine. I have like little notes for us to remember, and I'm gonna come back to that later. So this is like cholera pandemic happened like 7 times. It's the first one, and it kept on happening over 150, a century and a half, and a pandemic continued even with the vaccine. So there's many things to think about there. And then third plague, a pandemic. This is now Asia, Fiji, measles, Russian flu. This is the first avian flu. So the first flu pandemic happened 1889. And then here we are, 1918 Spanish flu. I put quotes under Spanish because it's a complete misnomer. The first case was identified in Madrid, I believe, in Spain. So they call it Spanish flu. And this, I will come back to this point. We all feel the need to, find the reason why this is all happening, blame somebody. Next slide. So this is the last one. So, 1957, now we're in the, 20th century, Asian flu, H1N1 of, different variation. And we know 1981, HIV AIDS. HIV AIDS, by the way, there's no vaccine, right? And it's manageable. You can live with HIV without, HIV virus under control. It's still going on. We have 35 million deaths so far, cumulative, since 1981 by HIV AIDS. COVID so far, 5. So it's actually much, much, much bigger. Again, I'm gonna make the point, depending on who matters. So when HIV first came out, 4H, we called it 4H, so hemophiliacs, heroin addicts, homosexuals, and Haitians for some reason. And it is completely not true, any of it. Even homosexual, right? Gay people were subjected to it. And so there are a lot of, LGBT population who got infected with the virus, but we know countless children in Sub-Saharan Africa and women who got infected by their husbands with HIV, all got infected. This is not a homosexual disease. So again, it depends on, who matters, the way we approach and the way we communicate about these pandemics. 2003, SARS, as we know, SARS, this is SARS-CoV-1, and that was a wake-up call for the worldwide, for us to improve the outbreak responses. So then following H1N1, MERS, swine flu, Ebola, Zika, did not become, pan out to be a pandemic. So we were we were able to better control those epidemics. And then here we are, SARS-CoV-2, and I'm putting Kung flu in there because, again, we are looking for somebody to blame. This is not China virus. It has nothing to do with East Asia, but we know what's been going on. Next slide. So I'm sorry, I don't know why this slide, the format is a little messed up. I apologize. So some points, some commonalities of all these pandemics. Many pandemics lasted or recurred over a long time, 30 years, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years. So I know we're thinking 2 years, this is too much. I cannot take one more day, but let's just put that into perspective. Number 2, all of the pandemic diseases have become chronic disease. So even HIV, those are chronic disease now, right? Hansen's leprosy, flu, the influenza, we get vaccine every year. So either we get boosters or there's chronic disease. So this is how humankind evolves with other things living on this earth, and that's how we cope and maintain our humanity. 세 번째로, there's always, pandemic is used against the marginalized population. And when the 영국이 옛날에 인도를 occupy했을 때도 there was this pandemic. So 그거를 핑계로, they used to also oppress Indian population more, and that happens it's not necessarily oppressive measure in the US, but there's a lot of political turmoil around the pandemics. We all feel threatened and then we turn up against each other. We have, not always. 그리고 항상 더 많이 당하고 더 많이 피해를 보는 population이 있고 또 안 보는 피해를 안 보고 오히려 더 잘 되는 돈도 더 많이 벌고 건강하게 아주 safe하게 그렇게 살 수 있는 그렇게 사는 population도 있고 다섯 번째로 I'm gonna come back to this point. I hope this is a great learning point and news for you. There's a tremendous human progress made following kind of every pandemic. That's sort of the cyclical process of human progress, human evolvement, human development. So I'm going to come to that. I'll come back to that again. And not all pandemics have been through the airborne, the droplet or just airborne infection or respiratory, like 여기 airway로 들어가서 병이 걸리는 그런 병이 다 그렇진 않았지만은 the ones that became really big problems are the respiratory, precisely because it's because of the human network. We communicate, we interact with other humans, and that's how. So respiratory pandemic or epidemic may likely come again. I am not cursing this world, but this is bound to happen. It's not necessarily about whether it's going to happen, it's about how we're going to prepare for this. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about quickly impact of pandemic over time. Pandemics reorder societies in unexpected ways. We've seen that. Our decisions shape how viruses travel, and virus in turn reshapes us. So we are in the thick of this. So I don't think you need an explanation on this slide. Next, please. So short-term은 이제 처음에 이제 2020년을 생각하시면 되죠. 너무너무 힘들고 힘든 일이 많고 너무나 많이 피해자가 많지만 아까도 얘기했듯이 it could have been so much worse, really so much worse. 그리고 there's always minority, socially marginalized population who get hurt more, and then society breaks apart. We grieve, and society breaks apart because public health, 그러니까 락다운을 하느냐, 이코노미를 살리느냐, 학교 문을 닫느냐 그런 결정하면서 사람들이 의견이 갈리죠. 그러면서 society breaks apart because of that. This happens every time. And incompetent leadership, this is not the only pandemic with incompetent leadership. I mean, from WHO, 그다음에 country level, some countries' presidents, all the way down to local level, right? And we always, first with this denial, like I said, 2 weeks, we're gonna be okay, 14 weeks, 18 weeks, right? And then there's always, and then we've got social media. So there's a lot of misinformation and lies. I mean, our president straight out lied to us. So that happens. And then there's always this is somebody else's fault. Like you brought this, China is a China virus. So there's a blame shift. Next slide. We're in the intermediate. So this year, 2021, 2022, maybe 2023, we're not done. We can be done. We're going to be done. We're not done yet. And vaccine is basically a medical miracle of our generation. 보통 역사적으로 봤을 때 백신 디벨롭 하는데 한 10년 정도 걸렸어요. 그리고 이볼라 에피데믹 때 그 백신이 5년 만에 만들어졌는데 그게 that was the most amazing human progress at that point. We have vaccine for COVID-19 within less than 1 year. So, and there's many different options of, how they made this inoculation technology. But that's something we need to acknowledge. We are so far ahead, and that's because all these pandemics have happened in our history. And we get vaccinated basically to take the epidemiologic wind out of the virus's sails, So it's like, oh, we have no human to go to now, right? The more vaccination, the better. And also let's remember mask wearing, vaccination, locking down in your house, it's not just for you. It's also for our friends and our community. So we take care of each other. This is how we tell each other we're in it together. And vaccine is not the panacea. It is nobody's fault. We need to come together and really to understand, acknowledge what is happening, and then strengthen our community and society together. And so vaccine is not the panacea. So what does that mean? We have to continue with our preventive measures. We have to continue developing drugs to treat COVID-19. And we have to think about how we can make the housing quality better, how we can support, women who are taking care of their kids and family, cooking 3 times a day and working at home. Next slide. Long-term effect. So this is like down the line, 5 years, 10 years. So we are going to eventually go into post-pandemic booming period. I call that post-pandemic party. There's going to be more social, but we've been locked down, and then we're gonna literally go crazy socially, artistically, culturally, and business, technology. And everybody's looking for meaning of life because obviously, right? Like, what is all this about? And how can I reflect on my life? It's happening. And there's going to be, and there's already, and this is a KOWIN, it's a women network, so it's relevant to us. A lot of women, if your income was not so high and it was just not safe enough, you have to take care of your children. You have to be home with your children. So a lot of women than men quit their jobs. So if that continues for the next few years, then the women's job market is going to shrink, and that's going to set women's employability and upward mobility in a different trajectory. So those are some things for us to think about. Pandemic is a national security threat. What can we do to ameliorate and minimize this threat? Like I said before, HIV, depending on, whether there's a political will, opioid epidemics, we have just US alone, just 2019 alone, we have 70,000 people who died from opioid addiction. So things can be much, much worse. And we need to think in the longer term how we cannot repeat this. Next slide. I think I'm running late, so I'm going to, this is a really important slide, so this one, and then I will wrap up. So 2 big examples. Plagues prompt major change of direction. So we all know Martin Luther, Reformation. This is right after the bubonic plague, 14th century. I don't know if you guys knew. Decline of the trust in the elites, elite society was dwindling really rapidly, and the trust in the high religious rule, that's also one of the same as aristocratic rule. So that the revolting was happening. So then there's a reformation, and the resurrection and redirection of science happened, right? Renaissance. 1920, right after literally 2 years after 1918 flu pandemic. These are the things that happened in the 1920s. We call it the Roaring 20s. Cars, telephones, films got created, radio, electrical appliances, airplanes became, not just military tool, but, became a business, commercial. The jazz age, the music and arts bloomed, and women in most of democratic states in the US started voting. So these things, we can draw, next slide, we can draw parallels in what's happening with us, right? So George Floyd, anti-Asian, this is not news. It's happened over years, multiple times, but now we're talking about it, right? Working from home, how can we make that easier for women? Childcare, telehealth, telemedicine. We are already seeing the human progress that we, like telehealth, in my field, it's taken years and years and years, and still unsuccessfully, we couldn't get those, reimbursable. Now we can, it's here to stay. So this is the last slide. Lessons learned. These are the points I want us to take home with us. There's going to be unintended consequences in coping with pandemics. Like I said, women out of job market, for example, and and these things we can predict. We can think forward and ahead. and we can minimize the unintended consequences. Average numbers, that would be me. Somebody who's healthy, I'm not so old, I am not so at high risk of COVID-19. Let's focus on the extreme numbers. So people, elderly people, people who are more vulnerable, people who are more marginalized, focus on them and let's make it work for them. Because in the end, we're in it together. It's gonna come back to you and me. We're all, it's one and the same. Related, individual freedom versus group accountability, vaccination, mask wearing, safety, public health safety practices are not just for you, it's for all of us in your family. And 사건보다는 해석이, 사건, like what happened, 사건 그 자체에 포커스하는 것보다는 이거를, put it in the context. 지금 저희들이 지금 세계 팬데믹 히스토리를 봤죠. 그걸 전체를 봤을 때 where this fits in and how, what this means to the humanity and how we can move forward with that understanding, I think changes a lot of things. And final point, humans are impressive. I think that we're amazing. And I know we talk a lot about all the bad things that's happened in the last 2 years, and we have plenty to talk about. But we cooperated. We've seen acts of sacrifices. We've seen people sharing things and sharing knowledge and rallying together. Healthcare workers, essential workers, and people who lost jobs, they hung on. Our children, they couldn't go to school for a whole year, but they survived and thrived through this, right? And vaccine scientists, we have the vaccine. We are already ready to move on to the next chapter. I think that we need to focus more on celebrating our human resiliency and how we can do this, and we're in this together. So let's take care of each other. Thank you. I'm sorry I ran over.
Oh gosh. Thank you so much. No problem, Dr. Moon. That was fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation. And we're just so grateful for all of your expertise, but mostly working through this and how you came to the last lesson learned when the whole thing began with you crying every day, worrying about the humanity, not just for your own safety, but it's just what a journey that this has been for all of us. But it was just a privilege to hear that from you as well. So thank you so much. Well, I know that you may have a lot of questions, and so please continue to jot it down, and you will have a chance to ask by unmuting yourself later or in the chat as well. And if you want to just put it there, it'll live there, and we'll continue to mull this over. Well, when I was asked to MC this, but also to share, oh gosh, well, thank you for this slide. I should just do a very brief introduction of myself. I am a musician. I'm mainly working with a youth orchestra these days, and I'm currently the artistic director of Wharton Institute for the Performing Arts in New Jersey and principal conductor of New Jersey Youth Symphony. And we can probably go to the next slide. Thank you. My sharing this time is somewhat related and trying to be the bridge, musical bridge for this conference between the first speaker and the second speaker as we are talking about this pandemic and how we are really all in this together, experiencing, having that common human experience. So for the artists, often their response after a tragedy, as we just talked about the 1920s being an amazing, revival and of post-pandemic era. I wanted to just feature one of my favorite composers, who happens to be Korean-American woman from New York. And many of you might know her. Ji-young Kim is her name, and she resides in Long Island. But I met her a couple decades ago, and I thought that I would share with you, this being a KOWIN conference, celebrate Korean-American women, and also in the world of music, and creative art where she would do. She's a composer herself, and trying to figure out what music to share so that we can have kind of sonification of current situation and find some solace that music offers often, and sense of hope. But also, if we need to grieve, if we need to just have a moment to be sad about things, that's okay as well. So this is what I came up with. So Jiyoung Kim, you can check her out at jiyoungkim.net. But she's a Korean-born composer who was educated in Korea and as well as in the United States. And her music, therefore, harmonizes the unique cultural aspects from both Eastern and Western traditions. So she studied composition at Yonsei University in Korea, and then came here to study in master's program at Indiana University, Shepherd School of Music. And then she received a doctorate of music at Yale University. And then she was named the very infamous Bunting Fellowship Award at Harvard University, where she composed and researched Asian music and philosophy. Now, if you remember back in 2015, something devastating happened in Korea, Sewol-ho. It was a Sewol ferry disaster in April of 2014 that claimed the lives of over 250 high school students in Korea. And then the month, a year from then, in 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525 crashed in the Alps, taking lives of 150 passengers, including many high school exchange students at that time. Also, the same month, terrorists in Kenya killed 147 people, mostly college students. So a lot of young people lost their lives. And this was Jiyoung's response by composing a piece called Lullaby of Waves. And I don't know, many of you may know a Korean lullaby, 자장가, 섬집 아기. And the story goes like this. When mom goes to collect oysters in the shade of the island, baby is left alone in an empty cottage. Baby falls asleep with her arms crossed to the lullaby of song sung by the waves of the sea. Though the baby is sleeping deeply and peacefully, the sound of the seagull's cry makes mom very nervous and her heart flutter. So she puts the half-filled oyster basket on her head and she runs home on the sandy road. The pandemic really affected women, as we just heard from Dr. Moon's presentation. And this working mom, right? This working mom rushing back because she's worried about the child. There was no childcare. The baby was to fend for herself. And in this context, I found this little YouTube video that has an animation. And I wonder if we can hear this lullaby because Jiyoung uses this very lullaby in her Lullaby of the Waves as her main theme in the second movement that we will also share with you. So Sunny 선생님, if you could play that, we would appreciate that.
아
when I first watched this, not only was I reminded of this song when I was young that my grandma would sing for me, but also just seeing this as a working mom, I couldn't stop the tears as I saw her running back with half-filled oyster basket. She couldn't even finish the day because she was so nervous about her child. And I think during this pandemic, I think we've been overtly touched by moments like that, and just very emotional state, especially for those who are really under-resourced and underserved. So Chi-young takes this beautiful melody, child song, and then she writes a piece for string orchestra. The first movement is Elegy, a dedication, memory of all of those lost lives. Second movement is the Lullaby. And then the third movement is named Hope. Now we're going to just for the time's sake hear the second movement and listen for the violin solo of the Samchip Agi Lullaby. And then we're going to probably stop before as it gets to the hope part of it, when the music picks up and very perky again, that she gives us at the end. If you were to listen to this later, the very ending very loudly, but violins end up very high register, symbolizing, how the kids, when they hum, playing around, that sense of joy, that sense of just, being unaware of today's trouble, because, they're not focused on that. They're just focused on that moment and they're happy. And so that's how Ji-young's piece called Lullaby of the Waves are shaped. And so I hope you will go and Google this. And also this New York Chamber Players is conducted by a very, very wonderful Maestro Kim, also Korean American. So just wanted to share that. So Sanya Sensei, I know we queued it up, but 3 minutes and 48 seconds, I think that's when the second movement begins. Thank you so much, 선희 선생님. We'll probably stop there. That was the beginning of the hope section to the end of the piece. But I hope you were able to catch that beautiful 섬집 아기 quoted and by the beautiful violin and the viola. But I just thought that it would be a wonderful way to celebrate Jiyoung's accomplishments, but also to connect it with the common human experience of working woman. And so I hope that was that gave you a sense of hope at the end, but also a moment to just take a little breather. And so I think right now, I don't know, as a musician myself, we have to kind of do lots of stretching. Maybe I can just ask you to just do a quick stretch from where you are. You can always stand up, but also, roll your neck very slowly in one way and then the other direction. Yeah, all right. And I think as President Rhee has reminded me, we need to take our middle picture, photo number 2. So Sunny Sensei, thank you so much for sharing that so perfectly. Man, you are a great technician here with today. Thank you. So maybe if you didn't come on this screen before, maybe you can show your face if you feel comfortable. Again, this might end up on New York Times, so just smile beautifully. And 회장님, just let us know when you're ready to take it. You're muted, so we didn't get a 1, 2, 3.
회장님 뮤트로 돼 있어요.
Got it. Okay, so I'm gonna do it. 1, okay. All right, smile, open your eyes, 1, 2, 3, and second page, don't go away. We have 2 pages. All right, 자, 예쁘게 웃으세요, 김치. 다 찍었습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so if you feel, you have stretched a little bit, because of the time, we want to just plow right through. And I want to introduce to you our next speaker. Dr. Mina An will be speaking under the title of Rebuilding Better Together. Dr. Mina An is a psychologist who has researched in the areas of social cognitive processes, including attribution, counterfactual thinking, and affective behaviors. She studied fine arts and psychology as an undergraduate and received her doctorate degree at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She's co-author of the book, What Might Have Been, the Social Psychology of Counterfactual Thinking. She's currently a professor at Bergen Community College, where she enjoys teaching diverse student groups ranging from honor students and ESL students. She's also the faculty director of the Institute for Multicultural Learning and leads programs that promote human rights, diversity, and equity. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you, Dr. Mina An, and add her to the spotlight. All right. Let's welcome her with a wonderful, the raise, the little clap hands. All right, I think you are muted, so thank
안
you.
박사님 뮤트로 돼 있어요.
안녕하세요. 이렇게 코엔 컨퍼런스에 참가할 수 있게 돼서 영광이고요. 아까 그 너무 아름다운 선율을 들려주셔서 정말 감사합니다. 저도 섬집 그 아기를 너무 좋아하는 곡인데 그 일하는 엄마의 그 컨텍스트를 한 번도 생각을 해본 적이 없었던 것 같아요. 그 아기 입장에서만 생각해봤지. 근데 정말 아름다웠고요. 일단 이렇게 컨퍼런스를 마련하시느라 수고하시고 헌신하신 모든 관계자분들께 감사드리고요. 또 저에게 귀한 말씀을 해주신 Dr. 문께도 감사드립니다. 친구를 잃으신 그런 슬픔이 얼마나 깊을지 저 상상이 잘 가진 않지만 정말 저도 마음이 많이 아픕니다. 그런데 또 그 말씀하셨듯이 human resilience, 저희는 또 그 아픔을 이기면서 또한 성숙해 가는 것 같아요. 그래서 저도 오늘 비슷한 맥락의 말씀을 드리려고 이렇게 왔습니다. I would really like to argue that as challenging as this pandemic has been and continues to be, we can rebuild our body, mind, and society better than pre-COVID time by working together. And I think this is what Dr. Moon has referred to as well. And instead of just going back to normal, we can rebuild a life that is better than what it used to be by working together. 혼자는 좀 하기 힘들 수 있어요. 그런데 이렇게 힘든 시련을 견디면서 전보다 더 어쩌면 나은 삶을 이루어 나갈 수 있는 저는 희망을 얘기해 보고 싶습니다. 이렇게 옆에 소중한 사람을 잃고 또 아프기도 하면서 아무런 감정의 변화가 없다는 것은 어쩌면 비정상이라고도 극단적으로 얘기하면 그렇게 생각할 수 있을 것 같아요. 그래서 이제 그 신문에 그 통계를 또 나온 걸 보면은 그 pre-COVID보다 우울증이 한 3배 정도가 증가했다는 그런 기사를 읽은 적이 있어요. 그 미국에서. 이거 저희가 이제 지금 어찌 보면은 grief period를 지나고 있는 시기가 아닌가 싶어요. 그래서 그 닥터 문도 그렇지만 많은 분들이 사랑하는 사람을 잃고 또 스스로도 아프기도 하고 또 환자를 돌보거나 너무나 많은 또 일을 떠맡게 되는 그런 상황이죠. So, you know, we have lost so much, really, and we're grieving. And some of us have lost ones, like Dr. Moon, and some of us lost our jobs. Some of us have been sick. And so overall, the level of stress that we're dealing with has been just tremendous, as you all know. So it's really no wonder that we're feeling depressed and anxious. And this, on top of that, this pandemic is something we have never experienced. And we didn't know much about it. And we still don't know a lot about it, honestly. And this fear of unknown, uncertainty, and unpredictability is there. So I'm sorry, if you could go to the next slide, that'd be great. Thank you. When we face something unknown and unpredictable, we feel really out of control and you feel nervous and anxious. Next slide would be great. Thank you. We can feel helpless and frustrated. And on top of all this, we went through a long period of social isolation and have been dealing with challenges with childcare, just like what Dr. Moon was saying, while working from home. And some women had to quit their job to take care of the children because we were really still the primary caretakers in most families. And we had to cook a lot more, and we just had to do a lot more than before. We had to stand in line for groceries. I've just never had this kind of experience where I had to wait in hours to get one roll of toilet paper. That just seems so unreal, right? It's almost like, it feels so surreal to be like in a movie, to be able to get some kitchen towel, right? So it was just a very strange experience. 저희 부모님 세대에서 이렇게 뭐 전쟁이 났을 때, 6.25가 났을 때 뭐 그 물자가 귀해서, 음식이 귀해서 그 고생하셨던 말씀들을 했을 때 뭔가 옛날 얘기처럼 들렸는데 그것이 어떻게 이렇게 현실처럼 돼서 저희한테 다가왔기 때문에 참 당황스러웠습니다. 그래서 그 무력감이 생기고 helplessness라고 하죠. 그래서 무력감도 생기고 또 이 뭔가 모르는, 우리가 처음 겪어보는 이런 상황에서 굉장히 당혹스럽고 또 모든 사람들과 떨어져서 이 social isolation을 오랫동안 견뎠어야 했죠. 그런데다가 이제 그 여자로서 또 그 떠맡은 짐들이 더 컸던 것도 사실이에요. Next slide, please. And I'm so grateful for Dr. Moon to articulate so well about this social inequity. Pandemic did not hurt everybody equally. we saw clearly how COVID took a bigger toll on the weak and the marginalized. And race, gender, economic status played a huge role in how much we suffer. So for example, if you make less than 20,000 a year, then you're 7 times more likely to experience depression than if you make more than 75,000 a year. So the economic gap between the rich and poor became even bigger during pandemic. And ironically, some people actually profited greatly during pandemic, while some people lost their jobs. And this kind of disparity increased a feeling of relative deprivation among many people. So while many people continue to experience economic hardship, some are accumulating this unimaginable wealth. Last time I heard, Tesla is now worth more than $1 trillion. And I don't even know how much money that really is, right? 그러니까 X가 너무 크니까 이게 상상이 잘 안 되는 거예요. 이게 얼마나 큰 X인지도. 그런데 이제 어떤 사람은 정말 집에서 쫓겨날 위기에 있는가 하면 어떤 사람은 너무나 큰 부를 누리고 있는 이런 상황이 양극화가 벌어지니까 이 relative deprivation, 그야말로 나는 잘 힘든데 왜 내 주위에 있는 사람들은 모두 괜찮은 것 같은 그런 relative deprivation이 사실은 더 힘들게 느껴지거든요. 모두 같이 힘들면 덜 힘든 것 같은데 나만 힘든 것 같은 그런 기분이 들면 굉장히 힘듭니다, 사실. Next slide, please. 또한 한국 저희 사람으로서 견뎌야 하는 부분들도 있었죠. 다 아시다시피 이 아틀란트에서 벌어졌던 일들은 정말 상상을 초월하는 이런 슬픈 비극이었어요. Really, for Korean American women, I think we were dealing with additional threats during COVID. And yes, even before the pandemic, we have experienced prejudice, stereotypes, discrimination. And I have dealt with various microaggressions at work, like being taken as a secretary rather than a professor. They don't mean harm. It's just that that's what they were thinking. But I never thought that I would feel unsafe walking in my own suburban neighborhood, fearing for physical harm. This is all new. And as you know, the term China virus, really, with that term, Asian Americans became the target of increased physical attacks. And hate crimes against the AIPI community have increased 368% in New York City since the pandemic. 이게 어마어마한 넘버예요. 그러니까 400% 정도가 더 많이 일어난 것입니다. 그러니까 not surprisingly, really, 그러니까 동양 여자들을 향한 Asian women were twice more likely to experience attacks than men. 그러니까 동양 여자들이 훨씬 더 위험하게 된 것이죠. So as Korean American women, we feel much more vulnerable. The sense of vulnerability became much more intense. And ever before. And 저희 어머님이 이제 83세세요. 그래서 얼바인 캘리포니아 사시거든요. 근데 이제 거기는 미국에서도 굉장히 안전한 도시로 알려진 곳이죠. 그런데 3월 달에 이제 산책을 하시다가 다리가 아프셔서 산책을 하셔야 돼요, 매일. 그런데 이제 좀 위험해서 망설이시기도 하셨지만 그래도 이 다리를 쓰시려면 산책을 하셔야 되기 때문에 나가셨는데 어떤 사람이 백인 남성이 다가와서 Go back to your country 이렇게 소리를 크게 지르고 갔다고 해요. 그래서 물론 무서운 것도 무서운 거지만 상당히 당혹함을 느끼셨다고 합니다. 왜냐하면 여기서 사신 지가 거의 이제 40년 그렇게 되시는데 그러면 나의 나라는 어디인가라는 그런 생각이 들 수밖에 없죠. 그리고 이제 화가 난다기보다도 이제 confusion, 굉장히 당혹스러우신 거예요. 근데 저도 그런 얘기를 들으면 저는 이제 3,000마일이나 떨어져서 이 뉴저지에 사는데 너무 걱정도 되고 참 복잡한 마음이 들었어요. 그래서 이제 이렇게 저희 어머님만 그런 일을 당하신 것이 아니라 많은 분들이 그런 일을 겪고 계셨을 거고, 또 그런 생각을 하다 보면 굉장히 슬프기도 하고 또 화도 나고 그렇습니다. 이 아틀란틱 슈팅이 일어났을 때 저는 정말 너무나 쇼킹한 그런 마음이 들었고요. You know, it's just this visceral reaction to this attack. I mean, I can talk about it in terms of, you know, misogyny, racism, gun control, but I just felt so empathetic to this victim because I think I saw myself in this woman. She was the same age almost as I am. She was a mom like I am, and she had 2 children like I do, and she was really trying her best to support her family like I'm trying to do. And I could have easily been in her shoes. And as a new immigrant who was living in really the margin of the American society, trying to make the best of her son's future, she was just more vulnerable simply because of the fact that she was a first-generation immigrant and didn't have the job security like I do. And I thought of her, you know, what we call American dream and her hopes when she came to this country. And I felt her son's pain and suffering. And then I was so, again, shocked to hear the news that a young man was attacked in the subway in front of bystanders who didn't do anything. So I thought of my own son, who is now in college. And for the first time, I called and I said, don't take the subway by yourself, right? I mean, not that he's going to listen to me, but I really feared for his physical safety like I never did before. And I was just sitting around feeling worried about my own safety, but more than that, I fear for my elderly parents and my adult children. And these attacks reminded me that, you know, we are perpetually seen as foreigners who do not belong here. And no matter how hard we try to fit in to this so-called mainstream America, even when we are praised as the model minority, when things become hard, we became the scapegoats. This has happened in the past too, repeatedly. So I felt bitter and angry, thinking that maybe our parents shouldn't have come here, you know, right? And I worried about my future, my children's future in this country. But so apparently, you know, I'm not the only one feeling this way. Recent studies showed that they took a survey out of 790 Korean Americans, and 73% felt very threatened and reported feeling not well mentally. So this is a serious issue. So what can we do? So let's talk about that. Next slide, please. So, you know, we've been trying to come up with ways to deal with these attacks, right? These public hate crimes. So for example, in response to these hate crimes, people have developed 5 Ds of bystander intervention. So if we happen to witness an attack, we can distract the perpetrator and diffuse tension by spilling coffee next to them, for example. We can also delegate by reporting the attack to an authority figure, and document the attack by videotaping or taking photos for future use. We can choose to directly confront the harasser, but this could escalate the tension. So we can support the victim afterwards and try to help them by using what we call delay tactic. So what we choose to do will depend on the situation, time, and our ability. And we also always need to consider our own safety before we help anyone, right? Next slide, please. I'm also going to mention today some coping mechanisms we can personally use to manage stress, right? So, and first and foremost, actually, it's very important to maintain daily routine and to improve physical health. Psychological well-being is really closely connected to our physical health. And we all know that exercising is helpful for our physical health, but it's also really crucial for our mental health as well. So whatever form of exercise you can do, try to find, something that you could do. 아주 작은 거라도 괜찮아요. 그냥 아까 조금 전에 스트레칭 하라고 하셨는데 그거 굉장히 중요하고요. 하루 종일 저도 앉아 있다 보니까 어깨 뭐 굉장히 아파요. 그래서 조금이라도 이제 한 5분이라도 일어나서 왔다 갔다 한다든지 아니면 뭐 가능하다면 이제 짐에 가는 건 좀 힘들 수 있는데 산책을 한다든지 그냥 뭐 집에서 운동을 하신다든지 뭐라도 자기가 할 수 있고 너무 힘들지 않은 거를 하시는 게 제일 좋은 것 같습니다. 그리고 사실 잠이 굉장히 중요해요. Sleep. Consistent sleep routine. This is so important. So many good things happen while we sleep. 그래서 저희가 젊은 분들은 조금 이해하시기 힘드실 수도 있는데 저희가 조금씩 1살, 2살 나이를 먹어가면서 잠자는 게 그렇게 쉽지만은 않아요. 특히 마음이 우울하다든지 걱정이 많다든지 그럼 당연히 그 잠을, 그 수면의 질도 또 양도 안 좋을 수 있어요. 그런데 잠을 자는 것도 사실 좀 노력이 필요할 수 있습니다. 그래서 사실은 어제 저와 대화를 했던 분 중에 하나가 본인이 굉장히 노력을 많이 하신대요. 잠을 잘 자도록. 그래서 이제 뭐 안대를 한다든지 조격을 한다든지 또는 음악 그 백색 노이즈라고 하죠. 그런 뭐 음악을 좀 틀어놓고 잔다든지 어떤 방법을 써서라도 사실 잠을 잘 자면 많은 일이 해결될 수 있어요. 그래서 저는 정말 수면이 중요하다고 생각하는 사람 중에 하나고요. 일을 조금 덜 하더라도 잠을 자는 게 중요하다고 생각하는 사람 중에 하나입니다. 정신 건강에도 중요하고 육체적 건강에도 굉장히 중요해요. 수면이 어쩌면 가장 중요할 수도 있습니다. 그래서 잠을 잘 잘 수 있는 방법을 찾아보시기 권해드립니다. 해결할 일이 있다고 해서 잠을 안 자고 하는 것은 조금 도움이 안 될 수 있어요. 오히려 자고 나면 저희 그 뇌에서 많은 활동이 일어나요. 그래서 기억력도 향상되고 기분도 좋아질 수 있습니다. 그래서 사실은 잠을 다 잔 다음에 해결하는 게 훨씬 도움이 될 수 있어요. 마지막으로 I want to talk about fun, meaningful activities. And I think, we need to play. As human beings, having fun is so important. Just doing something for the pure reason of having fun. And I think a lot of us are not used to this idea as immigrants or children of immigrants. We think we have to be productive all the time. So then we feel kind of guilty when we do things just for pure fun. But as human beings, we need to do something that's entertaining and playful and laugh. So if we find something that makes us laugh, that's a really great treatment to dealing with stress. And we don't even let our kids play, right? We have to send them to 학원 and study more and get higher SAT score, get a higher GPA. Actually, what age, we all need to have fun. So this is a very important element of staying sane and being in good mood and having the stability of not having high anxiety and so forth. And also, let's find something that's meaningful for us. I have it easy because I love my job. I just find it so meaningful to me. So I don't have to find extra things to do. But maybe if that's not the case for some people, then find something, whether it's cooking or gardening or just spending time with your children or, helping your neighbor, whatever that happens to be, just finding something meaningful to do can be incredibly helpful for us to cope with stress. Next slide, please. Another important aspect of coping involves our psychological and emotional health. And more people are seeking therapy and counseling since COVID. And it seems that even companies are now providing mental health related services, which is great news. but we need to do more. We really need to work on decreasing stigma attached to counseling. Therapy is not just for treating severe psychological disorders, but it can be helpful in preventing mental health issues. We work with personal trainer to be physically fit. And I consider working with a therapist or counselor, it's just like, to work with somebody to stay mentally fit as well. And personally, I have found cognitive behavioral therapy, or what we call CBT, to be a really helpful tool. 이제부터 제가 그 cognitive behavioral therapy, 인지 행동 치료법에 대해서 조금 소개를 해드리도록 하겠습니다. 왜냐하면 이게 굉장히 요즘 이제 그 심리 치료도 자꾸 바뀌어요. 그래서 옛날에 쓰던 방법과 좀 이제 최신에 쓰는 방법이 좀 다를 수 있는데요. CBT는 행동인지 치료법은 상당히 효과적인 것으로 나타나고 있어요. 그리고 전에 했던 그 사이코테라피와는 또 상당히 비용도 그렇고 시간도 상당히 절약되는 그런 단축시킬 수 있는 그런 방법이라고 보고 있습니다. 저희가 이제 그 우울증이나 그 스트레스를 받거나 또 뭐 이렇게 그 불안 장애를 가지는 이유 중에 하나가 그 인지 왜곡 때문에 그런 경우가 많아요. 그래서 제가 인지 왜곡이 뭔지에 대해서도 좀 소개를 해드리려고 합니다. We often engage in, a lot of us, including myself, engage in self-defeating thoughts that are not really reality-based. So then we call these thoughts, by the way, cognitive distortions. And so for example, one of the cognitive distortions is what we call overgeneralization, right? We take one or very few cases and we make wide generalizations, right? Oh, I didn't get that account. I'm really bad at this job. That's an overgeneralization. We didn't get that one particular account and we don't really know exactly why that happened, but we jump to conclusion and say it was my fault and I'm not really good at this. That's what we call overgeneralization. And that's very, not only inaccurate, but self-defeating. Another example of cognitive distortion is what we call shoulds and musts. Assuming that we know what we or others should or should not do, and what the world should be like, rather than what the actual situations we're faced with, or having rigid rules, which we think should always apply, no matter what the circumstances are, right? So when we apply should to ourselves, we often feel guilty. And when we apply to others, we feel really frustrated, angry, resentful. So we can learn ways, and actually this is where the therapy comes in, right? What we call a CBT. We can learn to engage in healthy mindset by working with therapists who can help us to see and change the way we feel and think. 왜냐하면 그 생각과 저희의 마음은 엮여 있어요. 그래서 생각을 바꾸면 왜곡된 인지를 바꾸면 저희의 마음도 나아질 수 있다는 것이 바로 인지 행동 치료의 그 핵심입니다. 근데 굉장히 효과적이에요. 또 이제 그 한국 분들은 이 카운슬링에 대한 또한 그 저희 감정에 대한 상당히 그 뭐랄까 이렇게 억누르는 그런 게 있어요. 그래서 we don't really necessarily want to be open to our emotions or to express our emotions, right? We like to suppress them and not deal with them or deny them. And that could lead to a lot of issues later on, right? Because our emotions will not go away and they will be there, but it can come out in an unhealthy way, right? So instead of suppressing and avoiding topics related to emotions, we need to pay attention to how we feel and learn to express them in a productive and healthy way. So, recently psychologists have been studying the importance of developing emotional intelligence because we realize how important emotional self-awareness, expression, empathy, stress management, all of these could be so important in determining one's health as well as success in life. 성공하려면 사실은 감정 지수가 높아야 된다는 것을 저희가 계속해서 연구를 통해 보고 있어요. 그래서 이제 emotion focused coping이라는 것도 그 중에 하나이고요. mindfulness라는 것도 이제 요즘 상당히 한국에서도 많은 분들이 연구를 하시고 있죠. mindfulness라는 것은 사실 그냥 현재에 집중하는 거예요. 과거에 집착하거나 미래에 대해 걱정하는 것보다는 현재에 집중하기, 지금, 이 순간. So we focus on here and now instead of worrying about the future or ruminating about the past, right? And meditation could be part of it, but I'm not an expert on this, but there's so many benefits to mindfulness as well. And journaling, writing down your emotions, extremely helpful, right? I mean, studies have shown over and over again how helpful journaling can be. Writing your emotions down. It's very non-threatening when you don't have to talk to other people, but to just write it down, right? And it could be very therapeutic. I think it's very unfortunate that even if Korean Americans are seeking therapy, there is that language barrier, so they may not always find services that's helpful for them. But this is something we can all work on. Thank you. Oh, next slide is fine. Thank you so much. So social psychologist Shelley Taylor has shown that women are really good at coping by engaging in social relationships and interactions. And maybe that's why we live longer. She calls this tandem befriend. So she found out that the cancer patients, women, cancer patients, who were very socially active and gave and received social support were much more likely to get better than the ones who are socially inactive. So when we're not well, either physically or psychologically, we can reach out to other people and take care of each other, right? And one reason that one of the reasons that COVID took such a huge toll on us is that we became socially isolated for so long. And so more than ever, it's important that we seek social contact with friends and family in a safe way. 정말 혼자서는 살기 힘든 세상이에요, 사실. 그러니까 저희는 사회적인 존재들이기 때문에 혼자서 뭘 해결하려고 한다든지 그러면 너무 힘듭니다. 그래서 서로 도와주는 것. 닥터문도 그런 말씀을 많이 하셨잖아요. 소셜 코핑이라는 것이 참 중요합니다. Next slide, please. One last aspect of rebuilding I'd like to mention is on the social and cultural and institutional level. COVID has shown clearly how social inequity affects us in a direct way. And most of us are perpetrators, victims, and survivors of social inequity in some way. And we can no longer be blind and deny the reality that the notion of model minority role is harmful to us and our children and our grandchildren. There's no doubt about that. I have been thinking about what legacy I can leave for my children during this turbulent time. I mean, I don't know why it is that we as parents always think of their well-being more than our own. And, but I want to protect my kids, and I have been asking myself how I can do this. I obviously cannot follow them around. And even if I did, I'm not going to be able to fight off the attackers because, I'm 5'2", I don't know how to do taekwondo or anything. So I've been trying to do what I can do. As a teacher, I can teach. And I was saying before that I'm really blessed to have a job where I feel excited to go to work each morning. I teach at a community college in Bergen County, New Jersey. And I believe in community college's mission. of fostering social equity by providing education to those who need it. And during the pandemic, I became even more passionate about this mission. Witnessing so much violence against the AIPI community, I requested to establish an institute for multicultural learning at the college that would provide education to the Korean Americans. We now offer bilingual classes, and I have been working closely with Korean American students who seek college education, but have not been able to do so because of the language barrier. My colleagues and students have created a learning community. And during COVID, when we couldn't see other people, we comforted and supported each other by examining our Korean American identity. We did this by studying US history and psychology virtually. And we really became involved in the community activism as well. So next slide, please. When there was a protest in Fort Lee, New Jersey, we marched together and we all showed, they showed up. I was worried actually about my students' health because some of them are a little bit older, but they showed up and they marched with us. So I was so touched. Next slide, please. And since summer, we've been learning the American historical context in which racism has been originated and have been studying the struggle for racial equality. And I realized how ignorant I have been about the Asian American experiences. And I learned a lot from my colleague who teaches American history. Next slide, please. I have conducted several forums to address racism against the AIPI community, and my colleagues who are not Asian Americans have shown genuine concern and support, and it was quite moving. One colleague said to me, "Your pain is our pain," and I felt incredibly comforted. I realized the importance of a coalition because we're all interconnected and interdependent in some way. So I really resonated with what Dr. Moon was saying. So what we did was forming a reading group that covers topics of human rights. And so last month, we just read a book called Between the World and Me. Some of you might know this book already. The author talks about the struggle of Black Americans. We also created a learning group where our honors students, that's what the photo is showing. Our honors students, non-Korean students, teach our Korean American students English every week, every Saturday. I just came back from it right before this session. And every Saturday we get together and they're going over this conference presentation they will make next month. And it's been a joy to witness the friendship that's been forming between these two groups. This is a small step, tiny step, maybe insignificant, but what we're trying to do is to make a bit of a difference in this society that seems so unstable and turbulent. We have many, today we have this conference, KOWIN conference, we have so many people. You are far more powerful and influential than I am. And I always say that if you want anything done right, you ask Korean women to do it because you're the most resourceful, resilient, and competent people I know. 이 한국 여성들은요, 정말 너무나 대단한 분들이세요. 여기 모이신 분들은 저보다 훨씬 더 훌륭하시고 또 그 힘을 가지신 분들이 많아요. 너무너무 능력자들이세요. So it's good time for us to make some changes. We can cope individually, right? In physical, psychological, and social way by using some of the coping mechanisms I mentioned. But in the end, we need to address the root of this problem. If this pandemic taught us anything, it is that we can no longer be blind to the negative effects of the ways in which we try to sustain our old lifestyle. we can do better. And I know we can. We can rebuild our body, mind, and the world in which we live in by working together. And for that, I like to thank everyone who showed up today. And I just want to read this really briefly. This is a part of the article that my friend wrote. So if I could just take a minute to read this, I would really appreciate this. 가장 단시간 내에 미국 흑인 역사와 한인들이 자랑스럽게 여기는 모델 소수인종이라는 타이틀의 의미에 대해 배우고 싶다면 워싱턴의 교회가 있나 봅니다. 김영봉 목사님의 글을 권한답니다. 사회 제도가 부조리해도 눈 질끈 감고 열심히 일하는 게 잘하는 것이 아니라 부조리한 사회 제도를 고치기 위해 목소리를 내고 연대하고 노력할 수 있어야 한다. 모범적 소수 인종은 개인적인 영달의 성과로 평가받는 것이 아니라 이 사회에 대한 공헌의 정도로 평가받는 것이어야 한다. 이런 의미로 모범적 소수 인종이라는 별명을 얻는다면 그때는 그 별명을 자랑스럽게 여길 수 있을 것이다. 이런 글귀입니다. 여러분 제 말을 들어줘서 감사하고요. 같이 한다면 저희는 못할 게 없다고 저는 믿습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much, Dr. An. 감사합니다. So inspiring. And especially, the whole multicultural and equity and diversity work that you're doing at your school and setting up that center is really one concrete way that, the pandemic has brought all of us together. And that reminded me of one equation that my son's school guidance counselor put out there as their school motto this year is we, W-E, is greater, the math sign greater than me. So that whole sense of we is greater than me, and that whole African tribal philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because you are, and how interconnected we are, and that we are because you are. And today is just like a wonderful reminder that KOWIN is because we individually are participating here, and just a sense of grateful heart that I was just feeling. So wanted to share that. I know that Q&A, there were some questions coming through, and both for Dr. Moon, and I'm sure people are processing what Dr. An has just spoke about. And I know that PJ had a kind of a long question, and I think it might be better if maybe BJ, you might want to maybe unmute and just kind of share your question with everybody, and that might just make it easier. And maybe Sonia 선생님, we can stop sharing the screen, and so we can see each other's faces more. BJ?
Sure. Thanks, Helen. And great moderating and emceeing, by the way. Yeah, my question was to Dr. Moon. I mean, it was really fascinating overview of the historical perspective. And I think for me, I think I put in the chat box that I did not think of HIV as a pandemic, right? Because I think it's in this last year and this year that pandemic has become part of our vernacular. So people, or myself, think like this is, pandemic, we get it. But not knowing that HIV was, it was never like a global pandemic. And I don't think it was presented that way. And I think when you put in that aspect of how, depending on who you are, right, socioeconomically, and whether you are a vibrant, contributor in the society, or again, gay men who were, so I think it was an eye opener. And so my question in the chat was really like, going forward, since this is the theme, like what can we do for children and for ourselves as women in terms of emotional and mental health? And I think Dr. An's, sleep a lot. I think that's great. I have sleep deprivation and sleep issues. I can't sleep. But so I wanted to hear from both of you, like, what are some concrete, health, yes, eating well, exercise, yes, but I think there's got to be something that we could do that's more technical, or something that I could do daily. I think journaling, I think that helps as well. But I wanted to kind of push both of you to say, what do you do, both of you? Like, to be more mindful and emotional health well-being, because I think it is so important to go. And then it kind of ties into what someone on Grace said about safe space. I think, like, you know, this is really good that I could share, so be so vulnerable, but I think because we think we're superheroes, we have to be the Wonder Woman, that we don't really share, honestly. Like, I think I posted something on Facebook saying, oh, this is what happened a year ago, and look at this. And then I got like 20 messages saying, are you okay? Like, what's going on? So even that vulnerability, you have to choose who you share and how you share it. So that was a long way about saying, what do you both do and what can we do, as, you know, to have that sense of togetherness and moving forward. Thank you.
Dr. Moon,
Yeah.
would you like to answer that first?
Well, I'm gonna make mine short because I think it's more of your area, Dr. An. But in general, I can speak for at the population level. Not everybody needs like a intensive therapy. Although I do absolutely believe in the CBT that you discussed, and you talked about the Asian hate and anti-Asian crime, which I'm so glad, because I was so tempted to go there, but I just didn't have time to fit that in. I think that we need to be talking about this. I think that is, you know, our chronic problems. I'm speaking for myself, being, you know, as a woman, as an Asian, that's a double whammy. We need to be talking about this. We need to come out of our shells and share with others and start rewriting our narrative. Otherwise, it's just going to be inflated in your head, and you have this I would have this like a distorted story in my past, and how, you know, like in my own little world. So I think that this pandemic and so many events that have happened opened us to the opportunity to do that. And BJ, about your question about children, I do think, yes, I think that the marketing world already has named our children generation as like Gen Alpha. So this is a generation that's marked by like virtual, virtual connection, but children are so malleable, so pliable. They're incredibly resilient. Their normal is going to be a little different from our generation. So, having a hybrid environment as a new norm, having them connect virtually and in person, of course, both, they will bounce back. We need to get there, not sit here, but really need to get there ASAP, but children will get there. I think more about our generation, maybe a little younger, of women that need to really get on that healing cycle.
Well, one thing that I started doing, which might seem a little bit weird, but it is very effective. I promise you. Okay. So, you asked for something concrete. So daily practice of what I call self-compassion and self-care, right? And, you have to treat yourself like your best friend. And if you want to kind of get into the self-defeating mode, think about this. Would you say this to your best friend, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. Would you say that to your best friend, right? And so you have to be really kind to yourself and treat yourself like you're your best buddy, right? And one thing you can do is like this, like you kind of form, this is something I learned from my book club, okay? So if you want to just do this with me, like kind of put yourself like in you, it's like hugging yourself, giving yourself a hug. It actually is more effective if you look at yourself in the mirror. And when I first did this, I felt so awkward. I'm like, what am I doing? This is so ridiculous. Oh my gosh. But no, it's very effective. So you hug yourself like this, give yourself a hug, look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself anything that you would tell your best friend for that day, right? I tell myself, 괜찮아. 잘했어. 수고했어. 그 정도면 괜찮은 거야. Today, really, honestly, if I look back at what I did today, right, the conference, I'd be like thinking, oh my gosh, I should have done this better. I should have said this and things like that. Of course, I will do that. But overall, I'm learning. This is like a baby step. We're so used to self-defeating thoughts as Korean American women. We have such high expectation of ourselves, right? But let's praise ourselves. I mean, the fact that we showed up today here shows our commitment and dedication to do something better for ourselves and for other people. So let's, everyone, I'm okay, right? I'm good. I'm doing pretty well. Okay, I messed up that's okay. No problem. We move on, right? And so give yourself a big hug every day and tell yourself something kind every day. Just like you tell other people that you love, right? And I think that has been doing wonders for me. And, and I also tell myself how grateful I am to be me, right? Like, I appreciate myself so much. I know you're all laughing. I laugh too, but hey, I mean, look at all you do, honestly, right? Look at you. You're just so hardworking and so competent, and you've accomplished so much, and you do so much, right? Not even forget pre-COVID. I mean, now it's just, so much. So please be kind to yourselves and show that to yourself verbally, verbalize, and show by doing this.
That's wonderful. I
Yeah,
got emotional and I gave myself a hug. It's like, wow.
that's exactly what it is, right? Giving ourselves the hug that we would, like our best friend.
Be your best friend.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to, from the perspective of young people that PJ you had brought, the social emotional learning has become kind of a mandated part of educators' training these days. And ages between 17 and 24, the suicide rate is rising, especially, and I actually lost a formal friend, not a friend, a formal student of mine, and went to his funeral 2 weeks ago at the age of 19. And I think it's something that we are all very aware of. And so I started to really, at the end of my orchestra rehearsal, I do exactly what Dr. An says. I said, be good to yourself. That's your homework this week. You are so good about doing your homework. Keep this homework and make sure that you complete it each day. And, love yourself, be kind to yourself. And I think we really need that. And so thank you so much for that reminder. I know it is 5 o'clock, and I'm just going to put it in a chat that Pope Francis's quote that a friend of mine just sent to me. And just for your reading, I just thought it was a beautiful, another way of doing something for each other, living for some other other people's, to benefit other people's lives, is in our nature. So I'm going to ask our 회장님 what you think we should do. I don't know if you have the link, the Google form link that you can drop in the chat, because you wanted us to do the responses of the evaluation before we all left.
It's in the chat now.
Okay, great. And also, Dr. Moon shared an article of hers. I just pulled it up. She co-authored there. And, if you want to grab that link, because, if you don't grab it, I don't know if as a follow-up, 회장님 might be able to send that to us.
Yes, I will share.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you so much. It looks like a wonderful article, investing in our future. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to 회장님 to lead us in the reflection, and then close us out.
Okay, while you are doing it, there are simple 5 questions. Please fill out our evaluation. Your opinion is very valuable for us. So please click the link and then fill in your ideas in the Google form. Okay, it's toward the end. Thank you for staying late.